You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. I'm recording this message ahead of time, but it's scheduled to be broadcast during election week here in the United States, November 2024. To say the least, it's been a busy and crazy time here, folks, and in some ways it feels like the nation is more or less holding its breath. Here in podcast land, I'm getting much closer to announcing the subject of Season 11 of Dakota Spotlight. In Season 11, we will be back in North Dakota. I'll be sharing more soon, and Plus subscribers will be the first to hear all about it. Today, though, a rebroadcast from 2020 about a horrendous murder in Minot, North Dakota. Folks, this is a good episode about a terrible crime. As the saying goes, there is no time like the present, so let's dive right into it.
What is the address of your emergency?
519 16th Street. I just got home. My back door is kicked in, and my girl ain't answering the phone.
Okay, 519 16th Street.
Right across from Longfellow Elementary.
Okay, what's your name?
My name's Christopher Jackson. My son's inside with her and everything. I'm about to go in and see what the fuck is going on.
Okay, why don't you just wait for officers? I'll get them over there.
All right, thank you.
If there's anything that can happen through documentaries like this, through books like this, is perhaps we can find ways to prevent things like that. Angela was scared. Angela thought someone was stalking her. Angela thought someone was following her.
Yeah, we fucking had this planned out. And he fucked it up.
I mean, how did he...
Because he didn't clean the car good enough. One fucking spot of blood in my car.
Hey there, and welcome to Dakota Spotlight podcast and this one episode story. This episode is not part of a season, but rather an intriguing interview with a true crime fan from North Dakota who decided to become a true crime author. C.J. Wynn just published her first book in August of 2020, a book titled Wilder Intentions about the horrific murder of Angila Wilder in 2015 in Minot, North Dakota. I interviewed the author earlier this summer. She's going to tell us a little bit about why she wrote the book, how she went about it, and most importantly, she's going to tell us the story of Angila Wilder and her tragic murder. We will also briefly discuss something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, namely the role of drugs and alcohol in crime. Because it seems to me that whenever I attempt to understand the why about some of these bizarre stories, the perpetrators refer me to drugs and alcohol. Are drugs and alcohol a warranted explanation for violent crime? We'll talk briefly about that too. So let's meet C.J. Wynn. Due to the COVID pandemic, I interviewed her outdoors at a state park in North Dakota. The audio is mostly very good, but you may hear a boat in the background for a second, and you might hear an occasional very slight gust of wind. Here she is.
So I'm C.J. Wynn. I'm originally from North Dakota. I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, and then moved to Minot when I was 3. And I graduated from Minot High School and then went in 94. And then I went on to graduate from the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks with a degree in psychology. And then I also have a master's degree in organizational psychology. Now, the book is titled Wilder Intentions. It's being published by Blackline Publishing, and it will be available on paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. So the book is about the 2015 murder of Angila Wilder, which happened in Minot, North Dakota, November of 2015. It was eventually found out that she was stabbed to death in her bed while she slept, while her 2-year-old toddler was just down the hall from her, also asleep in his bed. It was found out that her ex-husband, Richie Wilder Jr., stabbed her to death while she slept in her room.
C.J. Wynn lives in Arizona today, but because she's from Minot, North Dakota, when she heard that the television program Dateline NBC was going to be covering the Angila Wilder murder, she became intrigued.
I'd recorded it and sat down and watched it, and for whatever reason, the minute I watched it, I knew that there had to be so much more information than what was shared in that hour-long episode, and just given kind of my background in researching true crime, I just thought, this is it. I'm ready to do this. And I knew this was the book I had to do because it was so close to home.
I asked the author to tell us briefly about the victim, Angila Wilder, and the crime itself.
She was 30 years old. She was the mother of 3. It was later kind of determined that she actually was pregnant again, just in the very, very early stages, but she was pregnant when she was killed. She was murdered in her home in the middle of the night on Friday, November 13th.
Investigators originally suspected Angela's fiancé and live-in boyfriend, Christopher Jackson, the man who arrived home from his job at Walmart, where he worked the night shift.
He had been trying to reach her. She was supposed to pick him up at Walmart that morning from work. She never showed up. She was not answering any of his calls, any of his text messages. So he ended up having to take a taxi home. And when he got home, he saw that the back door to their house was ajar. And he walked a little bit closer and found that it was damaged. So he surmised that it had been kicked in. And his fiancée, Angila Wilder, and their 2-year-old son were inside the house, and he did not go in the house. He called 911, and it was later kind of speculated about why he didn't go in the house. He later said that he regretted not going in there, but he had called 911, and they did find that she was behind the door to their bedroom was locked. The police did have to kick it down, and they found her body on the floor in a pool of her blood. You know, investigators initially did think that Christopher Jackson might have had something to do with it, and they brought him down for questioning right away, but just listening to the pain and the agony in Christopher's voice was, I think, enough for them to realize that there's no way he could have had something to do with it. But her family did not live in North Dakota. Her family lived in what kind of dispersed. Her father lived in Alabama, her mother lived in Florida, and her sister lived in Texas. And they all got word of it pretty quickly through Christopher and began calling the detectives. And all of them pretty much said the same thing, is that there's no way Christopher would have had anything to do with it, that it had to be her ex-husband, Richie Wilder Jr.
Richie Wilder Jr. was Angela's first husband. The couple had met in Alabama and moved to North Dakota when Richie Wilder joined the military and was stationed at the Air Force Base in Minot. They had 2 children together, but in 2012 they divorced and settled on an amicable child custody arrangement. Within a year, both Angela and her ex-husband Richie moved on to new relationships. Angela became engaged with Christopher Jackson, the man we just heard about who came home from his job at Walmart and found the door kicked in. Angela's ex-husband, Richie, was in a new relationship, too. He had married a petite kindergarten teacher named Cynthia Flaidland.
And so, you know, they called in Richie later that day, and his interview juxtaposed against Christopher's interview was like night and day. And it was pretty clear that Richie was hiding something.
Within just a few weeks, Angela's ex-husband, Richie Wilder, was arrested for Angela's murder. Police had evidence that he had snuck into her home in the middle of the night and killed her while her 2-year-old was down the hall and her boyfriend, Christopher, was at work at Walmart.
They had DNA evidence. They had just a mountain of evidence against Richie, and he was arrested just 5 weeks later.
So you might be thinking that although this is a very tragic story, it's also a rather straightforward story, wasn't it? A man killed his ex-wife in cold blood. End of story. Right?
Not even close. Not even close. It should have been end of story once Richie was arrested. The DNA evidence pointed towards him. Detectives really didn't know if he'd done it himself, but there was no evidence pointing towards anything else. Of course, they suspected that his wife, Cynthia, may have been involved somehow, but there was just... Richie did not divulge any kind of that information. Cynthia maintained her story that she'd been home all night.
In fact, Richie Wilder claimed that he was innocent of the crime.
And Richie refused to talk to detectives once he was arrested. Until he was ready to talk. And when he started talking, he never stopped, to his detriment.
We both were kind of waiting like where the lobby / the front of the school is right there, the entrance to Longfellow.
Despite the evidence against him, Richie came up with some crazy stories. One story that he made up was that it was actually Christopher Jackson, Angela's new boyfriend and fiancé, who had killed her. Richie claimed that Angela's fiancé had contacted him and said that he thought that Angela was cheating on him while he was at work at Walmart. Richie claimed that he asked Richie to come and pick him up at Walmart one night, and then together they would catch Angela in bed with another man. That way they could testify in court together and prove that Angela was an unfit mother, and then both men would get full custody of their own children. Richie Wilder attempted to feed this tall tale to investigators one day. He claimed that he picked up Angela's fiancé on a street corner near Walmart.
But right in that entrance right there, he was on that corner by the corner of 37th and the entrance right there.
So by that driveway then?
Yes, sir.
Was he there when you pulled up?
Yes, sir.
Richie then claimed they drove to Angela's house, entered the house, went to the bedroom to catch Angela in bed with a lover.
When he opened the door, that was like their bedroom. There's a bed and a dresser and stuff in there.
So he opened the door?
He opened the door.
Okay. Where were you at this time?
I was still behind him, and as he was going in the room, I just stood at their bedroom door.
And then, Richie claimed, Angela's fiancé went berserk and killed Angela, stabbing her.
So, of course, she went to fight back, and, like, he drug her off the bed, and he kept just stabbing her. And, he just kept stabbing her, and I was like, what the fuck you doing, man? I ran over there. And I touched her neck to feel her pulse, because she was kind of like, and there was just blood everywhere.
Richie was a pretty good actor, maybe, but what he didn't know was that the police had already looked very closely at Angela's fiancé. They had also looked very closely at surveillance video from Walmart. They had studied it backwards and forwards, and they could prove that Angela's fiancé never left Walmart the night Angela was killed. Here is a detective explaining that very thing to Richie Wilder.
Chris did not leave Walmart during those times.
I know he did, because I picked him up.
I know he didn't because I watched him on video. I watched the minutes click by. I don't know if you did this on your own or if there was somebody with you, but it wasn't Chris.
No, they didn't know if Richie did this on his own or not, but they knew that he did it. He was convicted of murder and went to prison for life. But then one day, the Minot Police Department got a very interesting phone call. Apparently, after her husband was arrested for murder, Cynthia got a little bit lonely.
And began reaching out to some of her former flames. And one of them had actually done a little bit of time in jail himself for some things that he had done several years earlier. And I think that she felt comfortable in talking to him because he had some experience with that. And she ended up divulging some information that he became very concerned with. And so he eventually reached out to the Minot Police Department, and he eventually became confidential informant for the Minot Police Department. And
he agreed to wear a wire and take Cynthia out on the town on a type of date or whatever it was, and to attempt to get her to admit to any involvement she may have had in the murder. And so that's what happened. The informant and Cynthia Wilder went out on the town in Minot, while just down the street, the Minot police listened in. First, the informant picked up Cynthia Wilder with his vehicle and engaged her in chit-chat on the way to a bar.
It really is hot as fuck up in Colorado, too.
Colorado's south.
Yeah, but it's high in elevation, so it's up.
True.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
I was thinking the Duck.
Okay.
Because the rooster.
Then they parked and went into the bar where they spent a few hours socializing and drinking.
Oh. Yes, I am thirsty. What do you have on tap?
The domestics, and then we have Blue Moon.
Then they left the bar.
I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, what are we doing after the bar afterwards?
Afterwards, they went to get some fast food.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, could I get a grilled chicken burrito? You need a drink. Drink.
Just water would be wonderful.
2 waters.
And then they parked to eat in the car and to talk, first about child custody issues and things like that.
She was up here for the trial, and then we had court a few months later, and she told the judge that I wouldn't let her see the kids. I'm like, I have pictures of you with the fucking kids. Like, I don't...
And then they talked about a different topic, the murder of Angila Wilder.
I don't know. I'm just mad all the time, and I don't know why.
About what?
I don't know. That's the problem. Like, I don't know.
Are you mad at your husband?
No, like, I'm proud of him. I'm just pissed that he got caught and that he got sloppy and impatient, and because we like had this thing like planned for like 2 fucking years, and we were just waiting on the fucking...
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
And eventually, Cynthia's kind of brick wall that she had put up to investigators and anyone else who asked the questions of her began to crumble.
Like,
Jesus.
I helped him. Like, I would leave, like, when he worked nights, I would leave the house at, like, midnight and, like, sit outside her house in my vehicle seeing who came into the house, when her boyfriend left, yeah. We fucking had this planned out. And he fucked it up.
I mean, how did he,
Because he didn't clean the car good enough. One fucking spot of blood in my car.
how the fuck do you even clean blood? I thought they put luminol on it. I've seen a lot of crime shows. I thought if they put luminol on it, like, it shows up no matter what.
They did the luminol. Okay, so they took my car the first time, November 13th, and they just searched it. It was in the school parking lot, and all they found was, like, a spot of blood on the passenger door. I don't even fucking know how there was blood on the passenger door. Like, I don't know how blood got on the passenger door.
Did he get in the passenger door?
I don't know. I don't fucking know. Like,
When Angela had been scared and thinking that someone was stalking her, someone was watching her, as it turns out, she was right. She was right. That she had been being watched in her home to find out when she was going to be alone by Cynthia Wilder.
he came home that night and he said it got sloppy. She fought back. He had to do what he had to do. I helped him clean up. He left again to, like, dispose of the clothing and the weapon and everything, and I thought we were, like, in the clear.
And then Cynthia Wilder was arrested, charged, convicted, and went to prison for life. You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. In a moment, the author C.J. Wynn will tell us how she got interested in true crime, how she went about writing her book, and then she'll tell us about when she went to visit Cynthia Wilder in prison, the woman who helped her husband murder his ex-wife. C.J. Wynn became interested in true crime at a young age. For her, it started back in the 80s when she spent a lot of evenings watching true crime TV shows with her mother. She even remembers the first one she ever watched.
The first one was called The Burning Bed. It was Farrah Fawcett was in it, and it was about an abused woman who ended up killing her husband by burning him in their bed. And so ever since then, we would just watch every single true crime episode that there was. And American Justice with Bill Curtis on A&E, every Dateline, every 4 to 8 hours. The summer before my freshman year of college, we sat and watched the O.J. Simpson trial on end for hours together.
Wilder Intentions is C.J. Wynn's first book.
I've always been interested in writing. I've always loved writing. I always loved writing college papers and things like that. But I have never written anything true crime prior to this. However, I've read well over 100 true crime books and kind of familiarized myself with the authors that I really like, the style that I really like. And so I naively perhaps thought, well, I'm somewhat of an expert given that I've read all these things and I've watched all these things. And so I just, I reached out to one of my favorite true crime authors, Shanna Hogan, New York Times bestselling author. She wrote the book about the Jodi Arias case, which happened in Arizona. Shanna also lives in Arizona. And, I really didn't anticipate that she would respond back to me, but I just asked her for some initial guidance and feedback on how to get started in doing this. And to my surprise and really delight, actually, she responded back, and it sounded as though we had quite a bit in common. So we met for coffee, and she's kind of been my mentor every step of the way.
I asked the author how she first set out to start working on this book.
So one of the first things I did is I reached out to the Minot Police Department. I wanted to know how much was going to be available in terms of public records, any interviews, things like that. And thankfully, actually, through the Dateline show, they had already prepared a lot of that information, so it was kind of already set to go.
Her next step was to ask the Minot Police Department if any of the officers and detectives who worked on this case would agree to an interview. Ultimately, she was given access to 4 different officers.
Dave Goodman, Sergeant Jessica Sundheim, Senior Officer Carmen Asham, and then Officer Matt Pappenfuss. All of them were just awesome. We sat down and had kind of a round table for a couple hours.
Another thing she did was reach out to Cynthia Wilder in prison, the woman who had helped her husband kill his ex-wife, Angila Wilder.
And so I began emailing her in October of 2018, just a couple months after I'd seen that Dateline. And then I maintained a email communication with her for about 6 to 7 months before I actually traveled back to North Dakota, to New England, North Dakota, where she is at the North Dakota Correctional Unit for Women, and visited with her in June of 2019, so a year ago. The prison in New England is actually an old Catholic school. And so it was converted to a women's prison in the late 90s. And it's just this little waiting room with security cameras and windows and things, a couple of chairs, and then a little hallway off to the side. They led me down this little hallway to a door and opened it up, and there she was. You know, I'm kind of a tall girl. I'm about 5'9", and she is barely 5 foot tall. The things that you see of her, and especially when you read in the book, you will probably come up with the conclusion that there's an emotional aspect missing to her personality in terms of having empathy. She told the confidential informant that she does not, in general, care about other people. She kind of laments to herself that although she's a mother and a kindergarten teacher, she really doesn't care about others, which is kind of surprising. But it does fit with a lot of what I uncovered in my research and things that she eventually shared with me. And then meeting her in person, it seemed to me that she was, in general, a fairly bubbly person, you know, talking about her family and things like that. She's really quite bubbly. She was very open. It's kind of when we started to talk a little bit about the murder itself that she sort of clammed up.
I asked CJ Wynn what she was attempting to achieve by writing this book. What was she looking for? As it turns out, I had no trouble understanding her answer because it's something I can relate to very well. She wants to understand why these things happen.
And I think every time that I dive into it, I do understand. Whether it's right or not, it at least helps my mind rest to trying to understand. And if there's anything that can happen through documentaries like this, through books like this, is perhaps we can find ways to possibly prevent things like that. Angela was scared. Angela thought someone was stalking her. Angela thought someone was following her, but she really didn't do anything. And I'm certainly not saying that she's at fault in any way, shape, or form, but she didn't do anything to take steps of potentially protecting herself in terms of being more vocal about it and saying, I think this is happening to me. A lot of times the signs are all there. They're all there. All the red flags are there. In this particular case, aside from the fact that Angela felt that someone was following her, that someone was watching her, there really weren't any glaring red flags that would have precipitated any kind of action like this by Richie Wilder against Angela. And to a certain extent, the more readers look at this book and understand who Richie was as a person, you may find that there simply was no way to stop something like this, that this is what he was going to do, because that's the character and behavior that he was leading towards for a long time. Cynthia wasn't even 30 years old when this happened. You know, Richie was just a few years older. They are now sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. Barring any kind of miracle for either of them, they're never leaving jail. This is their life now. And you have to ask, do you sit behind these barbed wire fences and lock doors and feel like a vice is closing in on you because you can't leave? There's nothing you can do. That's it. And so at 30 years old, life in prison without the chance of parole, does that mean 60 years?
I asked CJ Wynn what people can expect from reading her book.
I know that people have probably seen the Dateline. And what I would say is that there's really so much more information, and Dateline always does a great job in presenting essentially the overall story. Wilder Intentions really takes a deeper look into the backgrounds of everyone involved. Angela Wilder, Richie Wilder Jr., Cynthia Wilder. While Dateline really showed essentially, here's what happened, here's who was responsible, and here was the ultimate outcome of that. This book really takes into account things that people have not yet heard, things that transpired behind bars while Richie awaited trial, things that happened while Cynthia was waiting for her husband to go on trial, things that she did, actions that she took. You can read things on a document, you can read things on a transcript, you can see things on a video, but you have to be able to put context behind that so a reader finds meaning and finds it rich and can actually engage in it. So what I try to do as a writer is try to make people feel like they're actually in the room with these people when this is when things like this are happening, that they can put themselves in the position of the detective and understand why the detectives are answering the questions that they are, that they can visualize the mannerisms and the tone of voice, of Richie Wilder Jr., of Christopher Jackson, things like that. So I hope that when people read this book, they feel that I've given them an opportunity to almost put themselves as though they are in the actual situation. They're almost living it out as they're reading the words on the pages. My intent with writing this book is that someone died in the most tragic, horrific manner possible. And her name should never be forgotten. The things that she brought to people's lives, she was a loving mother. She was a loving sister, a loving daughter. She loved her fiance. She was in nursing school. All she ever wanted to do was care for others and be a mother. And she was taken from this earth tragically and horrifically, and it never should have happened. And I hope that her memory is never lost. So you have a lot of people that are addicted to drugs and alcohol that don't do things like that, right? That don't commit murders, that don't look at murders and do nothing about it. So what's the difference? So can you use drugs and alcohol as the crux to, well, that's why this happened, when there's people that are on drugs and alcohol that don't do things like that? And so I feel like it's got to be a combination of things. So the drugs and alcohol, is that something, people who are addicted to the drugs and alcohol, who are participating in things like that, is there more to it? Are they using drugs and alcohol to get past a troubled childhood? But then again, you have people who have troubled childhoods who don't do things like that. It is hard. It is hard. And I understand completely how you feel, is that isn't good enough for me. That excuse isn't good enough for me for why this happened. Because then doesn't it come down to more of an argument about morals? I mean, I still go back to a lot of times personal choice. If your moral compass is broken, you know that. You know it is. Like, listen to Cynthia Wilder say, I don't give a shit about anybody. I don't give a fuck about anybody. I don't care about anybody. She knows that. She's very, very aware of that for herself. But it doesn't matter. She has no interest in changing that at all. How do you fix that? How do you find an answer to that if you have someone who understands that their moral compass is broken but has no interest in doing anything differently? She's a mother and a kindergarten teacher. This woman is teaching kindergarten for other people's children. That's scary to me. One thing that really bothers me is that neither Cynthia nor Richie Wilder have ever apologized to Angila's family. Whether they would actually mean it sincerely or not, I don't know that necessarily matters, but neither one of them have. They both still say she deserved to die, and that's probably the most disturbing thing to me in writing this book is that I would say that that's the closure that I do not have. That the two people who are responsible for this still have absolutely no regret or remorse for it.
The book is titled Wilder Intentions. The author is C.J. Wynn. You can find the book on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook. The music you're listening to was provided courtesy of Dr. Jamart, Bismarck, North Dakota. Please check them out at bandcamp.com at drjmart.bandcamp.com. That's drjmart.bandcamp.com. Thanks again for listening.